Maya never laid eyes on the van until it slid alongside her. Hands closed around her, yanking her into the shadows. Rope dug into her wrists, a gag muffled her voice, and in a matter of minutes, she was bound to a tree in the woods, surrounded by masked men whose laughter cackled like hyenas. One moved in clothes and spat, "Let's see if your soldier husband can rescue you in time." Miles away, Daniel's phone rang. He listened, his eyes furrowed. Without uttering a word, he opened the box beneath their bed where Delta Force weapons waited. They believed they had cornered his wife. They had only let him out. Before starting the video, comment where in the world you're watching from, like and subscribe, because the next is that one you don't want to miss. The evening was still, too still. A crescent moon hung low in the sky, its silver light spilling across the two-lane road that bisected the pine woods of Ridgefield County. It was not the kind of road that anyone traveled after dark unless they had no choice, and Maya Carter understood that. But she hadn't had a lot of options. The hospital had kept her late once more, understaffed and overwhelmed, and by the time she did get to clock out, the buses no longer ran. She wrapped her hands around the steering wheel of her battered old sedan and muttered to herself, 20 more minutes, home, then bed. But her stomach was restless. Something in the atmosphere didn't feel right. The first indication was when she made the curve and noticed the headlights, 4 of them, crossed diagonally on the road, blocking traffic. Initially, she thought perhaps it was an accident, but as she braked, the figures of men coalesced from the vehicles, men with leather jackets bearing the same snarling skull insignia. The Reaper crew. Maya's heart rate increased. She'd heard rumors about them. A gang that distributed meth across the county, shaking down mom-and-pop shops and leaving marks on anyone who didn't comply. But why here? Why her? She was reaching for her phone when the driver's side window blew in. A fist made of leather shattered the glass, and a hand pulled the door open. "Get out," one of them yelled. Maya screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the forest. Another man yanked her out, dragging her across the gravel. She fought, kicking, twisting, landing a sharp elbow into one man's ribs, but there were too many. Rough rope burned her wrists as they bound her hands. "Feisty," one of them sneered, breath sour with whiskey. "Boss said she'd be a message. Guess we'll hang our message up nice and pretty." They pushed her into the bed of a pickup and took it further into the woods. The trip was brief but vicious, each rut in the dirt road jerking her bound arms. When the truck finally came to a stop, they pulled her out again and took her under the looming pines. By the trunk of an old oak, they pitched her against it. Rope was wrapped around her breasts, holding her close to the bark. She gasped as splinters bit into her flesh. A man moved forward, wide under the bandana mask. His eyes shone with cruelty. "Word is," he said, "your husband thinks he's some kind of hero. Ex-military, Delta Force, huh? Well, let's see if the big bad soldier comes running when his wife is screaming in the woods." Her blood turned cold. They knew Daniel. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. She couldn't let them see her break. "Do what you want," Maya growled through gritted teeth, "but if you think he won't find you, you don't know him." The men laughed, but unease flickered across their faces. One spat to the side, saying, "All talk, nobody scares the Reaper crew." What they didn't see was the tiny silver chain at Maya's throat. Hanging from it was a locket, unremarkable to everyone else, but within, pressed against the chill metal, was a micro-trigger no larger than her thumbnail. Maya rolled her shoulder, causing the locket to jab the tree just so. A subtle click throbbed through the chain. Miles away, in a remote farmhouse on the outskirts of town, a phone flashed. Daniel Carter's eyes burst open. Daniel Carter was a light sleeper. Years of war zones had seared the habit onto his nerves. The slightest noise or change of light could rouse him from sleep as suddenly as a gunshot. And so when the phone on the bedside table flashed, not ringing, not buzzing, but glowing with a soft red light, he was sitting up before his brain even realized what was happening. His chest constricted. This wasn't any alert, it was the alert. He grabbed the device, thumb swiping across the encrypted app he'd written himself back in the paranoia days when it had still been second nature. The screen displayed only one word in block letters. Daniel's blood turned cold, then hot. The locket. Maya had activated it. He was in motion before the idea was even complete. Feet thudded onto the floor, muscles coiling as if the passage of time had erased itself. The farmhouse was dark and still, but his body hummed with urgency. She's in trouble, she's alive, but she needs me. In the bedroom corner, under a closet false panel, rested the arsenal he vowed he'd never use again. His fingers located the lock in the blackness without deliberation, digits entering the combination. A quiet click. The door creaked open. Inside, a matte black rifle case, a few handguns, ammo boxes, and a combat knife with a blade worn smooth by years of use. Beside it, neatly folded with military discipline, was the plate carrier vest that he had not laid hands on in 5 years. Daniel slowly breathed out, calming the tempest within him. He freed the vest, drawing it over his t-shirt. The Velcro straps bit into him with a reassuring pull. The weight was both alien and familiar, like putting on a second skin he'd assumed he'd lost. From the nightstand, he grabbed his wedding band, the one he always took off before gearing up. He slid it onto the chain around his neck, close to his dog tags. The metal was cool against his skin. "Hold on, Maya," he muttered, voice low and grim. "I'm coming." Below, the kitchen of the farmhouse was still, moonlight illuminating the floorboards. Daniel strode with haste, but not urgency, every movement controlled. He opened the secret drawer under the pantry and retrieved a creased county map, laying it flat on the table. The locket signal was encoded with GPS. The receiver in his hand flashed, casting coordinates onto the map in fiery numbers. His gaze followed instantly to the woods along the north side of Ridgefield Highway, deep off the grid. "Smart," he breathed angrily. They didn't think anyone would ever hear her. But he would. He strapped a sidearm to his thigh, inspected the magazine, chambered a round. He loaded 2 knives, a flashlight, a set of lock picks, and 3 smoke grenades, mementos from another life. His rifle came last, carried like an old friend. For an instant, he gazed at the gun. He recalled the last time he had employed it, not overseas, but in his own yard, dispatching men who believed they could harm his family. Ever since that night, he'd promised Maya he was finished. And here he was. A low growl rippled through his throat. This isn't violating the promise, he assured himself. This is upholding it. By the time Daniel eased into his pickup truck, the farmhouse was already a ghost house behind him. He drove for the first mile in darkness, relying on instinct and memory to navigate the dirt road. His eyes narrowed, his breathing slowed down. The soldier in him, the soldier he'd buried, was alert again. The Reaper crew had no clue what kind of storm they'd summoned up unto themselves. The night air nipped at the skin of Maya. The ropes dug into her chest and wrists until her arms had gone numb. With each breath she took was the smell of moist earth and pine sap, seasoned by the acrid smell of cigarettes and cheap booze on the men surrounding her. The Reaper crew did not stay silent. They moved like wolves who had already got their prey cornered, laughing, pushing one another, opening and closing knives as if playing with games. But occasionally they would glance at her, to her braveness, to the fact that she was not crying, and the laughter would stall. She held on to that. If fear unsettled them, then braveness was her sole arsenal. One of them, tall and wiry with tattoos crawling up his neck, stepped closer. He squatted until his face was inches from hers. "Your man," he drawled, the words slurring. "He's supposed to be some big-shot soldier, right? We'll see how tough he is when he's kneeling in front of us, begging." Maya forced herself to hold his gaze. "You'll never see him coming," she said. The smile on the man's face wavered. His gaze turned cold, and he struck her across the face. Pain exploded in her jaw, but she flatly refused to react. He craved a reaction. She would not give him the pleasure. Another voice, rasping and exasperated, interrupted. "Cut it out, Vex. Boss said she is bait, not a punching bag. If she screams before he appears, it spoils the message." Vex sneered, but stepped back, growling curses beneath his breath. Maya's heart slowed. She remembered Daniel, how peaceful he always was, even when the world around him was chaotic. She remembered his voice, the way it had the power to slice through her darkest moments and return her to reality. He knows, she reminded herself. He picked up the signal. He's on his way. Miles away, Daniel Carter drove like a stalking predator. The engine of the old Ford purred low as he turned off the paved road and into the forest. His headlights were dark, and he depended on the moonlight seeping through the leaves. The GPS signal blinked steadily on his phone, a solitary flashing dot in an ocean of blackness. His knuckles turned white against the steering wheel as he approached. He stopped every half-mile, shutting off the engine and getting out to listen. The woods whispered, the crunch of leaves, the hoot of an owl, the burble of a creek. Below it, Daniel listened for the unnatural whispers, the yell of men, the crinkle of a cigarette lighter, the metallic ring of a rifle bolt. At the third checkpoint, he caught it, distant on the breeze, a yell followed by ribald laughter. Daniel's jaw clenched, his senses refined like a knife being sharpened. He flung open the truck bed, grabbing his rifle and cinching on a headset. The earpiece wasn't hooked up to a team anymore, but it assisted him in getting into the mindset he required. Concentrate, breathe, one target at a time. He crept unseen into the trees, boots making hardly a whisper against the pine needles. His body acted from memory, not from thought, each step set to bypass dry limbs, each breath controlled. The night was no hindrance. He'd battled in jungles darker than this, deserts where heat shimmer distorted the air, cities where each shadow might conceal a muzzle flash. The Reaper crew believed these woods provided them with cover. To Daniel, they provided only opportunity. At the oak tree, Maya tightened the ropes. With each pull, they bit deeper, searing her skin raw. Her arms throbbed, her shoulders wailed. She gritted her teeth and ceased before she bled herself of strength. Now the gang was distracted. Two of them fought over whether Daniel would even appear. Another stumbled towards the truck, already half inebriated, but the leader, the bandana mask one, never took his eyes off her. He leaned on the oak, arms crossed. "You've got fire, I'll give you that," he said, voice flat, almost with an admiration tone. "But fire burns out. Everyone breaks sooner or later." Maya smiled nastily. "Then you don't know my husband." The leader leaned forward, looking at her. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Maya thought she saw uncertainty. Then, out of the darkness of the forest, a twig snapped. It was soft, almost inaudible, but Daniel was an expert at making noise when he needed to. The leader's head jerked toward the trees. The others moved after him, reaching for weapons. Maya's heart pounded, her lungs constricted. He was here. Daniel was here. Daniel knelt low under the pine branches, rifle firm against his shoulder. In the scope, he saw the gang move apart slightly, their nerve wavering. They weren't soldiers. They didn't know how to hold a perimeter, how to post a watch, how to hear the quiet. They were noisy, thoughtless, exposed. He saw the first target, a heavy-set man stumbling with a shotgun, attempting to be tough as his eyes flicked from side to side. The man spun slowly around, illuminated by the glowing tip of a cigarette. Daniel breathed out. The suppressed rifle wheezed once. The man fell like a marionette whose strings had been severed, soundless before he landed in the dirt. The others didn't see at first, but Daniel didn't wait for them to. He moved deeper into the woods, circling, becoming the shadow that hunted their perimeters. Each twig, each rustle of movement was measured. He wasn't rushing in blindly. He was dismantling them, one at a time. Maya hears the war begin. Maya's head jerked up at the distant thump. It wasn't the sound of a standard gunshot. It was cleaner, sharper. She didn't know weapons like Daniel did, but she knew enough to know precision. The Reapers, however, stood stock still in indecision. "Vex," one of them cried out, voice breaking. No response. Another changed, uncomfortably. "Man, I don't like this." "Shut up," the leader spat. He swept the tree line, finger quivering on the trigger of his gun. "It's nothing." Maya caught sight of it, The tension in his stance, the quiver of his jaw, they weren't invulnerable, they could bleed. She felt a surge of hope run hot through her. Daniel was near, closer than they knew. One by one, Daniel stalked through trees until he had an open shot at the next guy. Younger, nervous, his hands trembling as he attempted to jam in a magazine. He constantly looked over at Maya like he was already fearful of what they'd hung on that oak. Weak link, Daniel reasoned. He came in quietly, this time carrying the rifle over his shoulder. The knife slipped out of its sheath soundlessly. The young man never saw him. One moment he was working at a bullet, the next a hand closed over his mouth, pulling him back into the shadows, a knife against his throat. Daniel spoke in a low, even voice, barely a whisper. "Drop it." The magazine fell into the leaves. "Good," Daniel murmured, "now sleep." The knife's hilt struck hard at the base of the skull. The man sagged unconscious, lowered gently to the ground. Daniel stripped the weapon and ammo, tucking them away, another piece off the board. Fear in the camp. Back at the oak, the Reaper crew was unraveling. "Where the hell's Jinx?" one demanded. "Man, this ain't right. 2 guys gone and no sound. I'm telling you, someone's out there." The leader cursed, packing like a caged animal. "It's him," he spat. "The soldier, he's out there." Maya couldn't help herself. Despite the ropes digging into her arms, despite the fear pounding through her, she let a small smile curl at her lips. "You should have run while you had the chance," she said. The leader whirled on her, rage burning in his eyes. He charged forward, jamming the muzzle of his pistol under her chin. "Think it's funny, huh? We'll disassemble you before he arrives." Maya swallowed her terror and glared back at him. "Then get on with it." A twig snapped yet again, nearer this time. The leader's gaze flicked towards the trees. The hunt was underway. The stillness before the storm. The wood was full of quiet, not the serene kind, not the soft whisper of wind in leaves or the far-off hoot of an owl. This was a strained quiet, taut as a wire about to break. Maya Carter could feel it pushing against her breast as she strained against the ropes that held her fast to the oak. Her wrists were raw now, the skin ripped where rough fibers had dug in. The rope grated on her ribs with every breath. Her legs shook, not from weakness, but from strain in holding her upright against the immovable trunk. The men around her, 6 now that 2 were missing, were tense. She noticed it in the way they paced from foot to foot, the way their fingers drummed on their weapons. Their bluff had begun to seep out the instant the first corpse fell silent. She caught the leader's eye again. He was striding back and forth, like a lion in a cage that was too small, pistol never removing his hand. His bandana mask hid most of his face, but his eyes were everything. He was scared. "Good." Maya held on to that like a lifeline. Fear made men sloppy, and if Daniel was out there, and she knew in her bones he was, sloppiness would kill them. She shut her eyes for one quick second, breathing in through her nose, attempting to ground herself the way Daniel had instructed her years before. Then it had been about soothing pre-exam anxiety, about stabilizing her hands during those endless hours at the hospital. Now it was about staying alive. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, reset. Her heartbeat stabilized. She opened her eyes once more as another noise shattered the night. Not a loud one, not a clear one, just a creak, a rustling of branches, but in the ungodly silence, it might as well have been thunder. The gang spun towards it in an instant, weapons at the ready. And then there was the scream. Section 2, Daniel Strikes. Daniel Carter glided like water between the trees, quiet and smooth, his rifle tight against his shoulder, his finger on the trigger but not quite pressing. Each pace was deliberate, his boots seeking soft earth rather than cracking twigs. He spotted the man before the man spotted him. A sentinel with a crowbar in place of a pistol, poorly placed near a downed log. The idiot had his back turned half away, focused more on the cigarette in his fingers than on the woods that surrounded him. Daniel breathed out once, slow and steady. The suppressor whispered. The The bullet hit center mass, and the man's shriek ripped through the night before Daniel's second shot ended him for good. Daniel didn't tarry, he never hesitated. He dissolved into the night, already moving in a circle. Each scream, each corpse was a message. You are not the hunters this evening, you are prey. Section 3. Panic in the camp. Meanwhile, back at the Oak, chaos broke out. Damn it, that was close, one of them cried, spinning wildly around, pistol trembling. Who the hell is out there? Another shouted. The gamester cursed and gestured toward the sheep. Fan out, find him before he shoots us down like ducks. No one moved. Maya laughed almost. She saw it in their faces, the dawning realization that they weren't soldiers, that they weren't sheep for sheep's sake against a specter in the woods. Daniel was out there, and he was driving every second deeper into their skulls that truth. The leader growled and grabbed one of his men by the vest and pushed him forward. Go now. The man staggered, his eyes wide with fear. He raised his rifle and walked out into the dark, lost sight of between the trees. Seconds ticked by, 1, 5, 10. Then another cry, brief, cut off in mid-cry. The man never returned. Only the light of the campfire remained in the clearing, its jagged projections across the faces of the surviving Reaper crew. They were 7, down from 10, and while they attempted to be toughened, the rough edges were beginning to crack. Their eyes snapped at each noise. Their fingers jerked on triggers, restless, wild. Maya Carter could sense every bit of their terror. She could taste it in the air. The ropes dug into her skin, but she barely felt it anymore. She felt the quiet after the final scream, the oppressive stillness that fell on the woods like a dropped blanket. Daniel was near enough to get them to panic, far enough away to leave them wondering. One of the men, a bald thug and a lanky one at that, finally lost it. He raised his rifle at the trees and fired wildly, each shot ringing out like thunder in the quiet night. Come on out, coward, he yelled. You think you can get us, huh? The leader cursed and slapped him across the face. Conserve your ammo, you idiot, he wants you to waste it. Maya's smile faltered. Daniel was already victorious. He didn't require numbers. He possessed patience. He had precision. And now he had motive. Daniel knelt fewer than 40 yards from his quarry, sighting through the scope. His breath was calm, his fingers firm. He could kill them all tonight, leave standing no one. Part of him yearned to. But he needed answers. He adjusted his aim. The wild shooter was still recovering from the slap, wiping blood from his lip, his rifle hanging loose. A perfect target. Daniel's finger tightened. The suppressed shot was a whisper. The man folded instantly, his chest punched open. The others shouted, stumbling back, firing into the shadows. Daniel moved. He was already circling, already gone, while their bullets shredded empty bark. From the branch of her tree, Maya winced at the explosion of gunfire, her heart racing. And then she saw it, Daniel, for the slightest moment, phantoming between the trees. His face was unyielding, eyes like frost. He didn't resemble her husband at that instant. He resembled something far older, far tougher. The men noticed it too, and their bravery wavered. He's toying with us, one spat. Shut up and hold the line, the leader shouted, but even his voice trembled. The reckoning had started. The gang had started to loosely circle the Oak, weapons facing outward, as if quantity would compensate for control. Their leader shouted orders, attempting to sound authoritative, but his voice held cracks of uncertainty. Hold your position, he's only one man. Maya's heart thumped. One man, she thought, but not any man. The forest returned silence. And then Daniel moved. A flashbang grenade curved out of the trees and landed on the ground at their feet. For an instant, the gang froze, confusion written across their faces. The world erupted. White light branded their eyes, a blowback bang rocked the clearing. Men staggered, blinded, covering their ears. Rifles fell from hands. Daniel advanced. He stepped from the darkness like a ghost, rifle held high. The first man didn't even notice the bullet that punched him between the ribs. Another blundered about, blindly shooting, and Daniel took him down with a brutal kick to the legs, ending his struggles with a knife thrust through the vest. The clearing descended into chaos. "Shoot, shoot him," someone shouted, but their fire was wild, their eyes blurry. Daniel dodged between them, surgical, effective. A 3-round burst took down another. A knife cut a throat open. He didn't stop, each action sharpened by years of training where hesitation killed. Maya's breath was stopped. She knew Daniel was capable, that he bore scars of a past she'd only seen in nightmares. But to see him now was different. He wasn't her quiet, unyielding husband now. He was a predator, unmerciful, effective. For the first time, she felt safety and fear in a single beat of her heart. The leader bellowed through the ringing in his ears, hauling 2 of his men upright. "Form up, don't let him push you." But Daniel was already lost to their view. He disappeared back into the trees, his footsteps nothing but a whisper. A voice carried from the darkness, calm, steady. "You picked the wrong family." The men stayed stock-still, sweat ran down their faces, breaths heaving. Then the shooting resumed, accurate shots snapping from 3 sides. Daniel was on the move, firing, never staying in one spot twice. People fell in succession, the shadows of flames stroking their blood across the ground. Maya writhed against the ropes, no longer out of fear but desperation. She longed to reach out to him, to assist him, but she knew in her heart that this was his world and not hers. All she could do was last long enough for him to finish it. The leader recoiled toward her, his mask ripped away in the melee. His skin was white, his lips twisted with anger and terror. He pulled Maya's hair, slamming her head back, jamming his pistol into her temple. "Enough," he yelled into the forest. "You step out now, soldier boy, or your wife's brains decorate this tree." For an instant, there was silence. The forest held its breath. Maya's heart pounded in her ears. She ached to scream, to warn Daniel not to emerge, not to jeopardize himself, but her throat would not open. Then Daniel spoke again, nearer this time, peaceful, ice-cold. "If you fire, there won't be enough of you for the morgue to bag." The leader's eyes flashed wildly, hunting the gloom. His hand shook on the pistol. And that's when one of his men cracked. Leaning on his rifle, the younger thug took off for the trees, blundering through underbrush in wild panic. A lone suppressed bullet brought him down while he was in the middle of running. He collapsed on the ground with a thud, not moving. The leader's hold on Maya tightened. He was cornered, surrounded, and he knew it. The night in the desert was filled with the scent of cordite and sand. Sergeant First Class Daniel Carter crouched on a rocky ridge, the wind out of the desert tearing at his face. The stars overhead were hard, unforgiving points of light, and below lay a shadow-filled valley and the faint smolder of lanterns among a group of mud-brick compounds. Across the scope of his rifle, Daniel counted men between the buildings, men who were armed, their silhouettes sharp against the dim firelight. He saw the glint of AK barrels, the agitated shifting of guards at each corner. Next to him, Staff Sergeant Blake, Hawkins growled around the grip of a wad of gum. "Looks like a damn hornet's nest." Daniel didn't react. His finger lightly stayed outside the trigger guard, his breathing measured. Every muscle in his body was calm, every thought focused on a single point. At his earpiece, Colonel Hayes' voice crackled hard and low. "Bravo 1 status." Daniel hit the mic at his collar. "Target in sight, 12 tangos outside, unknown inside, compounds Christmas lighted." "Copy," Hayes replied. "Mission parameters remain. HVT is in the central building. Your team goes in quietly, extracts him alive. Got it." "Roger." Daniel looked back over his shoulder. His team waited in darkness behind him, Hawk, Morales, Jensen, and Pierce. Brothers in arms, men he'd fought alongside, men he trusted with his life. Hawk ejected his gum into the dirt. "Quiet," he says. "Whole damn village full of jihadis, and he wants quiet." Daniel shot him a look, and Hawk just smiled. Nerves dressed up as humor that was Hawk through and through. "On your word, Danny," Morales breathed, eyes gleaming behind night vision goggles. Daniel peered through the scope again, steady heart. He'd done this so many times he'd lost count. Breathe in, breathe out. The world narrowed down to just angles, shadows, threats. Move, he commanded. They descended in silence, the kind of silence that only years of drilling could produce. Boots touched sand soundlessly, weapons clung to shoulders. The men moved like water, their formation naturally shifting as the ground required. Daniel took them through the parched wash to the compound. All senses were alert. The creak of a boot within the walls, the distant laughter of men passing cigarettes, the ring of metal against rock on a rifle propped against stone. They came to the first wall. Daniel ducked against it, held up 2 fingers, then indicated left. Jensen and Pierce drew off, moving wide around to flank. Hawk growled, always hated these village crawls. Too many doors, too many eyes. Daniel ignored him. He raised his fist, hold. He breathed slower, heartbeat falling into the rhythm he'd trained himself into, calm, patient, unshakable. Then he crept forward, knife out. The first guard never laid eyes on him. A swift hand across the mouth, a swift rip of the blade, and the man fell silently to the ground. Daniel pulled him into the darkness, cleaned the knife, and motioned the others to advance. They forced the outer gate in less than 3 minutes. No alarms, not yet. Within the compound, the air was heavier, sweat, smoke. The acrid smell of goats pennied close by. Daniel's crew moved house to house, clearing each with deadly efficiency. 3 men sleeping with guns lying next to them never stirred. 2 more fell before they knew death was already in the room. At last they came to the middle building. Mud brick walls, heavy door of wood, a dim light pulsing within. Daniel knelt, ear against the door. Conversations inside, Arabic, low, friendly. He recognized 3 different tones, perhaps more. He glanced at Morales and held up 3 fingers. Morales nodded. Breach on 3, Daniel breathed. They stacked against the wall, rifles level, grenades within easy reach. Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle upon him, not fear, not uncertainty, but the familiar weight of choices that might end or begin lives. He came up with his hand, 1, 2, 3. The door burst inward. Gunfire came right away, ear-shattering in the cramped space. Daniel dispatched the first one with a double tap to the chest. Morales swung wide, killing another. Hawk took down the third, pinning him into a chokehold before slamming his head into the dirt floor. Shouts echoed through the air. 2 additional fighters emerged from a side room, firing bullets everywhere. Daniel took cover behind a pillar, wood and stones splintering above his head. He stuck his head out low, fired 3 rounds, dropped both of them. When the dust settled, just 1 man was left, their HVT cuffed to the floor in the corner, eyes wide with fear. Daniel's chest rose and fell as he dropped his rifle. The man was alive, mission accomplished. But it hadn't been silent. The first RPG struck the compound wall 30 seconds after. The explosion shook the building, sending Daniel to the ground. Dust hung in the air, choking, blinding. Hawk yelled something, but it was lost to gunfire spilling through the broken windows. They were surrounded. The entire village was now awake. Contact, east wall, Morales bellowed, shooting through the doorway. 2 more on the roof, Jensen shouted, his voice breaking in Daniel's earpiece. Daniel's universe contracted. Sound, fire, confusion, but his mind sliced through it like a knife. He took the HVT by the collar and pulled him to cover. Bullets chewed the wall where they had been standing. Pierce smoke out the west, Daniel snapped. Grenades hissed, clouds billowing. The team shifted like clockwork, muscle memory propelling them through the tempest. But even Daniel could see it. Too many enemies, not enough time. They were trapped. And for the first time in years, a shard of doubt pierced Daniel's iron calm. The second RPG ripped through the western wall, blowing stone and dust into the room. Daniel dodged as pieces of debris crashed past him, a piece of mud brick cutting a burning swath across his cheek. Ears rang, but training pushed aside the pain. Attention narrowed, as sharp as a knife. East side's collapsing, Hawk yelled, voice hoarse. He emptied 3 short bursts through the smoke, silhouettes dropping as they charged in. Daniel pulled the HVT further into concealment, pushing the shaking man down onto the dirt floor. Shut up, breathe, live. His brain worked the layout of the compound in real time, every wall, every corner, every choke point. Morales, flank right, Daniel snapped. Jensen on me, Pierce, cover the roofline, don't let them pin us inside. Copy, the responses came, each man moving without pause. Years of muscle memory clicked into place. Bullets tore the doorway, dust and sparks flying into the black. Daniel swung his rifle, fired back with merciless accuracy. 3 men went down, but more swarmed in behind them. Arab voices cried in the night, louder, angrier, closer. The entire goddamn village was awake now. Smoke's thinning, Morales yelled. He released another canister, white mist curling through the shattered walls. Daniel took advantage. Move, out the west breach. Hawk clutched the HVT's arm and pulled him up. The prisoner staggered, face smeared with fear. I can't. You can, or you die here, Hawk growled, propelling him forward. They sprinted through the breach, into the darkness heavy with gunfire and disarray. Daniel's boots thudded sand, his lungs searing with dust. Shadows scurried ahead, enemies closing in tight. He fired his rifle, 3 fast shots, 3 bodies collapsing to earth. The squad sprinted toward the dry wash they crossed earlier. Freedom lay beyond that ridge. Extraction waited 2 clicks west, if they could make it. Halfway across the wash, a spotlight snapped on from the village roof, blinding and searing against the smoke. Down, Daniel roared. A hail of bullets gnawed the sand all around them. Hawk pulled the HVT onto its side, cursing. Morales laid down return fire, squeezing off measured bursts, but the light continued to sweep, leaving them open. Daniel's chest tightened. He knew hesitation was a killer. He couldn't blink now. Jensen, suppress that roof. Jensen dropped to the ground, laying down a continuous stream into the spotlight crew. Pierce slung his rifle, snapped to his M320, and launched a grenade. The blast illuminated the night. The spotlight disappeared in a hail of sparks. The desert was dark once more, holy, kind darkness. They moved through the wash, dust scraping at teeth and skin. All nerves screamed danger. Each shadow promised death. Daniel pushed ahead, forcing his body inch by inch. The HVT pulled between Hawk and Morales. Behind, cries grew louder. More men, more guns, a mob pursuing phantoms. They made it to the outer ridge and climbed over the boulders, lungs laboring. The top hung above, jagged against the sky. Daniel braced a hand on rock, pulling himself up. And stopped. A figure stood at the top, rifle pointed down at them. Enemy. Daniel's heart bludgeoned once. He acted before thinking, caught up, rifle up, sights on, trigger squeezed. The man's head jerked back. He rolled down the boulders, gun clattering. Daniel took a slow breath. No time to think, no time to feel. Go, go, he spat, jerking the others up. At the ridge crest, the world yawned wide, a sweep of desert curving off into nothing, the extraction site far away. And behind, the firelight from the compound, the rumble of angry voices. They're not backing off, Morales panted, spitting dust. They don't have to, Hawk snarled. They've got the numbers. Daniel glanced at his watch, his compass, his instinct. Extraction was 15 minutes away, 15 minutes of nightmare. He scanned his men, face masks smudged with sweat and dirt, eyes blazing but unyielding. His brothers, his charge. And he knew it, a cutting pain in his chest. If he failed here, if he lost even one of them, it would be his burden to bear for the rest of his life. That's when the doubt whispered once more. The specter of all the missions that went bad, all the names on memorial walls back home. But Daniel pushed it away. Doubt didn't belong here, only steel. He stood up, rifle firmly in his hand. We go, stay low, stay quick with me. And they pushed into the desert darkness, pursued by a village, with one cowering man who did not yet realize that the devil himself was leading him to judgment. The desert seemed to go on and on. Daniel's unit stumbled, throbbing with fatigue, ammo dwindling. Behind them, the screaming never ceased, anger resounding off sand and rock. Morales hobbled, blood dripping down his pant leg, but did not fall. Hawk pulled the HVT, cursing under his breath through gritted teeth. Pierce struggled under the burden of his pack. Daniel pushed them forward with sheer determination. He bellowed orders, kept them moving, pushed air into lungs that rebelled against it. He would not lose another man. Tonight, never again. At last, the thump-thump of rotor blades sliced across the night. A shadow dived low, spewing sand into a tempest. The Black Hawk released flares, bathing the desert in flames. "Go, go," Daniel yelled, pushing his men towards rescue. Machine gun fire tore behind them, bullets glinting off rock. Daniel spun, watching the back, trigger finger firm. He dispatched 1, 2, 3 stalkers before racing to the bird. Hands clutched him, Hawk, Morales, Pierce, all pulling him in as the helicopter took off. The HVT was pushed to the floor, tied tighter. And Daniel at last allowed his rifle to drop. But as the village dwindled below them, flames eating at the sky, he realized something within him had broken. He'd gotten them home alive, but he also knew the faces of the men pursuing him would haunt his nights forever. Delta Force was his family and his curse. Transition, present day. Daniel woke suddenly in the motel room, soaked in sweat, heart pounding. The ghosts had not released him. They never would. Maya shifted next to him, murmuring his name, but he just lay there, clenching his jaw. He had buried that man, the ghost soldier. But now, the Reapers had compelled him to reopen the grave. And the hunt was starting. The hunt begins. Waking demons. Morning sunlight bled weakly through the thin motel curtains. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, boots laced, pistol on the nightstand. He hadn't slept, not really. His body rested, but his mind had marched through fire all night. Maya touched his shoulder gently. "Daniel, you're scaring me." He turned, eyes colder than she had ever seen, not angry, worse, empty, calculating. "They tied you to a tree, Maya," he said softly. "They believed you were prey." He took the pistol, made sure the magazine was in place, racked it slick. "They don't realize they woke a predator." She swallowed hard. This was not her husband, not the man who laughed on Sundays over the sizzling grill, not the man who vowed he'd never don the uniform of violence again. This was another forged in deserts and blood. "Daniel," she whispered, voice shaking, "if you go down that path." "I'm already on it," he said, and the tone in which he said it chilled her to the bone. The trail of blood. By noon, Daniel was on the streets, not wild, meticulous. He navigated through alleys, observed corners, listened. The Reapers weren't phantom figures, they had traces. A shattered bottle here, a graffiti there, rumors in pawnshops and bars. Maya followed in silence, clutching her jacket tight. She wanted to scream at him, beg him to stop, but part of her couldn't look away. She needed to see the truth, what her husband really was. In a dingy auto repair shop, Daniel cornered a low-ranking Reaper. The man sneered, attempted to play games. Daniel's hand flashed out, pinned him against the hood. The grin disappeared when Daniel pressed a knife just below his ribs, an angle only a professional killer would know. "Where's Kane?" Daniel whispered. The man flinched. I don't." Daniel twisted, just enough to hurt, not kill, not yet, but threaten. "Kane," Daniel intoned, voice as cold as stone. The thug blabbed everything, where the gang hid their hot cars, where they hung out, whose houses were safe. Daniel released him, and he fell, gasping. Maya had watched interrogations on TV. This wasn't that. This was primal. And Daniel didn't even flinch. First strike. That evening, the first Reaper convoy rolled. 2 trucks, 6 men, guns in sight. They thought they owned the road. They had no idea death waited behind the tree line. Daniel crept like shadow, face smeared with black paint, rifle borne silent. He tallied targets, scanned wind, gauged distance. Each movement practiced 1,000 times in desert seas away. He breathed softly, 6 men, 3 minutes. Maya, behind the dead log, breathed softly back, 3 minutes for what? He did not reply. The first shot snapped, suppressed, muted. A driver slumped. The truck careened, smashed into a ditch. Men tumbled out screaming. Daniel was in motion already. Knife glinted, 1 down. Silenced gun spat, 2 more. Maya covered her mouth in a gasp, witnessing a side of her husband she had never dreamed. No mercy, no hesitation, each movement economical, surgical. 6 men lay in the dirt 3 minutes later, silent, still. Daniel refilled quietly, eyes scanning the road. This was just a message. To whom? Maya breathed. To Kane, said Daniel, his eyes sparkled in the night, that the hunt has started. The woods had the odor of gunpowder and wet leaves. Smoke wove from the destroyed truck, climbing into the darkness above. 6 bodies were strewn about on the ground like soiled dolls. Maya was frozen initially. Her legs trembled so hard she feared she would fall. Daniel towered above the destruction, quiet, rifle slumped against his chest. His breathing was even, his eyes scanning, not focusing on what he'd done. For him, it was normal. For her, it was a nightmare. She strained to speak, though her voice was raw. Daniel, what did you just do? He turned back, serene, as if she'd inquired about the weather. What I had to. No, Maya shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. That wasn't Daniel, those were men, people, and you, she gagged on the words. You killed them like they were nothing. They weren't nothing, he replied calmly. They were soldiers in Kane's army. If I hadn't intervened tonight, tomorrow they'd be injuring someone else, perhaps binding another woman to a tree. The words sliced her like knives because she knew the truth of them, but the manner in which he delivered them, cold and detached, frightened her. This isn't you, she breathed. Daniel's jaw clenched. This has always been me, you just haven't noticed it until now. She backed a step, heart hammering. For the first time in their marriage, she wasn't sure who she was standing in front of. You're my husband, she said, almost pleading. The man who reads me poetry in the kitchen, the man who kissed me like the world would end on our wedding day. Not this. She gestured at the bodies. Not this monster. Daniel's face flickered, agony flaring behind his battle-hardened mask. For a heartbeat, she saw the man she loved again, but the steel reappeared once more. I don't have the luxury of being your husband right now, he said, not until Kane is gone. Her chest hurt, as if something was cracked within her. She wished to yell at him, to drag him back from the pit, but she could only whisper. And if you lose yourself in the process? Daniel avoided her eyes, gazing out across the tree line, unwilling to reply. The silence between them was denser than the corpses on the ground. The hunt tightens. By morning, the Reapers knew something was amiss. Their conv had not checked in. A safe house was still. Men whispered uneasily, their swagger eroding. Kane, leader of the gang, sat at a table in a dingy bar, cigarette smoke winding around his scarred features. His eyes were ice, predators. He listened to his lieutenants arguing. 6 men don't just disappear, one sneered. Cops, another growled. No, growled Kane, cutting them off. He edged closer, low, menacing voice. This ain't cops. This is something different, someone who understands war. He ground the cigarette into dust in the ashtray. Get to the bottom of who's pursuing us, Kane directed, and when you do, bring me his woman, alive. While Daniel was on the move, he and Maya slept out by the river, taking turns. Daniel cleaned his rifle with machine-like efficiency as if a priest would oil a cross. Maya observed him, nibbling her lip until it was bleeding. She wanted to be able to believe that some humanity remained in him, but every movement seemed too easy, too habitual. Where will we strike next? She whispered. Daniel didn't look up. They'll try to set a trap. I'm going to walk into it. Her blood ran cold. Daniel, no. He finally looked at her, eyes dark but certain. That's the only way to draw Cain out. He'll think he's the hunter, but he's not. He slid the rifle back together with a soft click. He's the prey. Cain's ambush was laid in the remains of a derelict factory on the outskirts of town, the sort of area where screams would fall silent. Dozens of reapers inside readied themselves with shotguns, rifles, machetes. They laughed, boasted, told themselves this ghost they pursued was mere mortal. Cain paced atop the catwalk, cigarette burning in the shadows, his voice gravel-like. This ain't just about killing him, this is about breaking him, and when his woman screams, he'll break. Maya sat gagged, bound to a chair below. Her eyes flitted around the room, terror blazing, but she did not weep. She recalled Daniel's words, he's the predator. Outside the factory, Daniel crouched in shadows, knife strapped to his thigh, silencer screwed on his rifle. He studied blueprints in his mind, entry points, choke zones, blind spots. They think I'm walking into their trap, he thought, but the trap's already mine. He cut power lines. Darkness swallowed the factory, reapers cursed, flashlights flicking on. Then death moved among them. Silent, swift, surgical. One by one, men dropped, throats cut, shots muffled, shadows whispered and then were gone. Panic erupted. Gunfire cracked at ghosts that weren't there. Cain roared, drawing his pistol, firing wildly into the dark. Show yourself, coward. A spotlight snapped on. Daniel stepped into the center of the floor, rifle steady, eyes like stone. You wanted me, he said coldly. Now you've got me. Predator versus predator. The factory was consumed by chaos. The sound of gunfire boomed, sparks flying from mangled steel. Daniel moved lightning fast, utilizing cover, utilizing fear. Every bullet he fired hit its mark, every step thought out. The Reapers were not soldiers, brawlers with guns. Against a Delta operator, they were sheep led to slaughter. Maya observed, heart ripped between horror and wonder. This wasn't about survival, this was war. Bodies fell, shouts turned to screams. Smoke filled the air, fire spreading from a ruptured gas drum. Finally, Cain leapt from the catwalk, landing heavy, machete gleaming. A mountain of a man, scarred from years of violence. Come on, soldier, Cain roared. Let's see what you've got without your toys. Daniel dropped his rifle, drew his knife. The two predators circled in the firelight, eyes locked, breathing like beasts. Then they clashed. Steel clanged against steel. Fists crashed, blades cut, boots pounded the concrete. They fought like men with nothing to lose. Cain was brute power, reckless and mad. Daniel was precise, every strike sharpened from 1,000 fights. The battle tore bloody across the factory floor, each man leaving fragments of himself behind. At last, Cain's machete cut into Daniel's arm, blood spurting. Cain smiled, not so invincible after all. Daniel spat blood, eyes afire. Neither are you. He struck his knife upwards, clean, deep, final. Cain's bellow gagged into silence. His body fell like a cut tree, thudding against metal. The Reapers hung motionless. Their king lay dead. Without him, they were naught. Daniel stood over the body, chest laboring, blade wet. It's over, he said. Shadows and sunlight. Sirens howled in the distance. The factory went up in flames, smoke billowing into the dawn. The Reaper's empire fell in a single night. Daniel freed Maya. She collapsed into his arms, crying, not from weakness, but from relief at having made it through hell. Daniel, she whispered against his chest, don't leave me in there again, don't become what I saw tonight. He stood there holding her, quiet, shaking. For the first time since the dream had started, he let the facade drop. He was once again just a man, broken, battered, but hers. They exited the flames together, hand in hand, as dawn spread over the horizon. Later, when the police showed up, the factory was smoldering ash and destruction. Journalists spoke of a massacre on the Whispers, but Daniel's name was never mentioned. He disappeared into darkness once again, a specter among men. Weeks went by, life painstakingly sewed itself back together. Maya resumed her classes. Daniel attempted to resume normalcy, making dinner, sitting on porches, inhaling serenity. But under the cover of darkness, when the trees creaked and groaned with the wind, Maya caught him looking into the night, hand clenched toward a gun that wasn't there. "Will the spirits ever release you?" she asked one evening, their hands clasped together. Daniel touched his lips to her forehead. "Perhaps not, but as long as I have you, they can't win me over." And for the first time in years, she believed him.